Firstly, Mr. Blair, what position is it that you want the Labour Party to take now on Brexit?
The most important thing is to realise that over the course of this year, we're going to have a chance for people to see what the alternative to present European Union membership is. The government will conclude its negotiations. I'm simply arguing we should have the right to have a final say on the terms of the new arrangements with the European Union, particularly in circumstances where over the last 18 months, we know a lot more now than we did back then. We know, for example, that the money is not going to come into the health service in the way that was explained to us. Actually, we've got less money for the health service. We know that our economic growth is down. We know that our currency is down. So, I'm saying we should have the right to rethink. Doesn't mean to say we will come to a different decision, but we should at least have the right to rethink.
But despite all the arguments you're making, there's no sign that public opinion is actually shifting at this point. So why are you calling for a second referendum at this stage?
Well, I'm calling at this stage, by the way, just for the right of people to have a final say. I mean, the truth is, before we leave in March 2019, we've got the right to change our minds up to that point. And when this negotiation proceeds in 2018, and I think it's going to be one which will involve very difficult choices, which will impact our living standards, our economy, our health service, and all these other things, at that point, we should be entitled to debate whether the new relationship is better than the existing one. And we can debate that not in terms of sort of predictions or claims, but in terms of the facts of what the government puts before us. So at this stage, I'm not arguing even for a second referendum, although you may get to that. It's simply saying, this thing's not concluded until it's concluded, and we should have the right to rethink if we want to.
But a lot of these arguments were rehearsed during the referendum campaign, and people may think there's something inherently undemocratic about saying, you didn't get the result you wanted during the referendum, so let's have a second one.
Yeah, so the answer to that is very, very simple. In June 2016, we voted to leave the European Union, and then perfectly rightly and perfectly correctly, the government then embarks on a process of negotiating a new relationship with Europe. But that new relationship can take many different forms. So when they've decided on what the new relationship is and negotiate it with Europe, we're then going to have something to compare the existing relationship to that we didn't know in June 2016, naturally.
But people knew that when they voted leave during the referendum. They knew there was an open-ended process. We didn't know exactly what leave was going to look like. They still backed it.
Right, but surely we're entitled to say when we actually see the terms of it, we've got the right to rethink if we want to. If, by the way, don't misunderstand me. If the will of the British people remains as it was back in June 2016, we will go forward and do Brexit, even if I think it's a fundamental mistake for the future of the country. That's democracy. But the debate at the moment is, are you entitled as a country once you see how things unfold and once we know certain things? And look, I think there were many people who voted Brexit, for example, because they believed if you vote Brexit, you're going to get this extra money for the health service. Look at the state of the health service today. We've got less money for the health service. In fact, we're going to be spending just on the direct costs of organising Brexit several £billion in the next 2 years, which could be spent on the health service.
But you can pick and choose your economic arguments. I mean, equally, the Remain campaign said there would be a recession after we voted to leave the EU. Actually, the economy is growing. They said unemployment would rise. It's at a record low. You can pick and choose your economic arguments, but public opinion is not shifting.
You can pick and choose your economic arguments. That's absolutely true. But what you can't dispute, because even the government now accepts it, is that growth is lower as a result of Brexit. That's less revenue for the country. And you can't really dispute things like the NHS shortages that you have now because you've got fewer staff coming from Europe who we desperately need. So there's a lot of facts that we didn't know then that we know now.
But those arguments were made, though, during the referendum campaign. People accepted the arguments. They voted leave. That surely is said and done.
Yeah, but back then in June 2016, you can make claims and counterclaims, right? You've now got 18 months of fact. Okay, so you can see what's actually happened. I mean, has this extra money come to the health service? No, actually, less money has gone to the health service. Right? That's now accepted. Now, okay, the people who argue for Brexit can say, yeah, but in the future we're going to get this money for the health service, but actually that £350 million didn't materialise. But more important, in a sense, than that is, what you can't possibly have known in June 2016 is the new relationship. Now we're going to see it. And I think it will involve, as we've seen over the Northern Ireland negotiation, some really, really tough choices that have a big impact on people's living standards. So I find it almost strange that what is, I would have thought, plain British common sense, namely when you see the full picture, you're entitled to a rethink, that this is regarded as somehow sort of treasonous or treacherous. Surely it's plain common sense to say you at least have the right to have a final say once you see the alternative. And if, by the way, you see the alternative and the country through Parliament or through an election or even through another referendum says, okay, fine, we still want to leave, fine. But surely we've got the right to have that say once we see what Brexit really means and really looks like.
If there is a case for a second say on Brexit, are you the man to be making that case? I mean, you are a member of the political establishment, of the elite that, arguably was rejected during the Brexit referendum. Are you helping here?
Yeah, but what I always say about this elite business is you've got elites on both sides of the argument. You've got established politicians, wealthy people, non-wealthy people on both sides of the argument. It's more sensible just to say, what is the right thing to do? And, in any event, of course I know there will be a lot of people criticising me for intervening on this at all, but, my attitude is, look, it's a free country. I've got a right to speak. People have got a right to listen or not, as they like.
But you are speaking as if you have huge sway over the Labour Party, when actually you're a figure of contempt among Jeremy Corbyn's wing of the party quite often.
Yeah, that's true.
Are they going to listen to you?
Maybe, maybe not. But I think, the one thing that there is a consensus about in the country, actually, between the leading Remainers and the leading Brexiteers, is that this is probably the most important decision the country's taken since the Second World War. Okay. If it's that important, it's worth really thinking it through. And I don't think it's wrong for people to say, come on, let's see what we eventually come up with as the alternative to Europe and then compare it. I think if it's that important a decision, we have that right and we should exercise that right.
Have you spoken to Jeremy Corbyn before making this intervention today?
No, I mean, we don't... Is
that helpful? Is that helpful to make an intervention without speaking to the leader of your own party?
I don't know whether it's helpful or not.
Well, he says it's unhelpful, so he clearly thinks he knows the answer to that.
I know he and I have a profound disagreement about this. What he thinks it's best to do is to carry through Brexit, right? And what I'm trying to say to people like him and others in the Labour Party is if you carry on with this Brexit business, you'll be in the same position as the Tory party. You're not going to be able to be spending your time on the health service over the next few years if you win an election, become a government. You're not going to be spending your time on working out how you improve education, build infrastructure, make for a fairer society. You're going to be spending your time, as this government is spending its time, on Brexit, from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to sleep at night.
That might be the case, but Labour just won a higher percentage of the vote share than you ever achieved in the 2017 election. So why should they think their position on Brexit is wrong at all?
First of all, on the percentages of the vote, on that basis, Theresa May would be a more successful Prime Minister than Margaret Thatcher. I mean, the fact is, the whole of British politics is somewhat distorted by the Brexit debate at the moment. But in any event, we can argue who's right electorally, who's wrong electorally. I happen to believe Labour would be in a stronger position if it took the line I'm saying on Brexit, but I may be wrong. I'm simply trying to argue what's right for the country, and at this stage, the only argument that needs to be secured is that we are able to have a meaningful say on the final deal, and we are entitled and can, if we wish to, in the light of a comparison between what we have and what we're going to have, we've got the right to change our minds. Now, that is a proposition, I think, that is perfectly democratic. And the fact you've got so many people from the Brexit side saying, no, this is over, you can't debate it, you can't even contemplate changing your mind, betrays their anxiety that when people really see what the alternative is, they'll say, well, are we really going to be better off?
Okay, and just lastly and briefly, did you warn Donald Trump's campaign that they were under surveillance by the British?
It's a kind of crazy world of politics today. I mean, this story is literally a fabrication from beginning to end. I've never had any such conversation, not merely with someone in the White House, but with anyone, anywhere, at any point in time. And honestly, anybody who knows the British intelligence services, and I do, the idea that they would start interfering in an American presidential campaign is literally absurd.
Did he want a job with his administration?
And what's more, the idea that I was angling for some job with the White House, no. I have a very passionate interest in the Middle East peace process, but I am absolutely determined to pursue that outside of any official function.